Calling the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, January 19th, 2022, 7 p.m. Introduction of commission members.
Mike Clayton.
Doug Regaller. John Emery.
Ruth Holstrom.
Anne Friedman Haas.
Okay, item number 3. Oops, excuse me. Planning and Zoning Commission is an independent advisory body of the City of Ames. The Planning and Zoning Commission members are volunteers of the community and not part of the city administration. The commission is responsible for preparation and adoption of the official comprehensive plan of the city and gives advice and recommendations on matters involving amendments to the zoning ordinance and the historic preservation ordinance guidelines, subdivision, annexations, master plans, and major site development plans, and developments within the Ames urban fringe areas. As an advisory commission, we welcome all comments and questions. We make our recommendations based on code, the facts presented, and input from the public. If the proceedings become lengthy, we may ask comments be focused on new information not previously presented. You may speak only once on an agenda item. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker information card and present it to the recording secretary. We ask that you come to the microphone to speak so that all comments may be recorded. Please state your name, address for the record prior to making any comments. The order of proceedings for each item on the agenda be as follows. City staff will present a staff report regarding the agenda item. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the city staff. The applicant will be invited to make a statement regarding the request. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Members of the audience will be invited to come forward to offer comments and questions. Once the public comment is closed, city staff and the applicant will have an opportunity for concluding remarks. The commission will discuss the application based on all the presentations and any comments given and come to a recommendation for the city council. The discussion may include further questions of the city staff and applicant for clarifications. With that, we'll move on to the next item of the agenda. The approval of the agenda.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Approved. Okay, item number 4, approval of the minutes of December 16th, 2021 meeting.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay.
I'll abstain.
One abstention.
Yeah.
Abstention. Of course you will.
I wasn't there, so.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a public forum for anything that is not on the agenda. Do we have anybody that wants to come forward? Seeing none, move on to item number 6. Public hearing for the annexation of 2105 and 2421 Dayton Avenue. I take it Justin's going to be the...
Yep. All right. Thank you very much. As you have before you, we have a 100% voluntary petition to annex the properties indicated above there on your screen into the city of Ames, 2105 and 2421 Dayton Avenue. These particular properties there are just west across the road from the USDA facilities, and these would be just about a half mile north of 13th Street, on the northeast side of Ames. So a bit of a background, the land use designation for this property was changed from an agricultural designation this past summer to a industrial designation in anticipation of this. And that was done by the property owner. The intent of the property owner is to annex the land in and develop it in an industrial capacity. The intent is to develop it into smaller sized industrial lots for future development. So the property is 72.99 acres, and the Ames Plan 2040 Comprehensive Plan indicates this property as being in the employment category that you see there. And that is a category of future land use that is designed to accommodate business and industrial growth in the future. So the land use does fit the proposed future use. This is located in Franklin Township. And as a result, there is a small historic cemetery that is on the property up to the northwest, in the northwest corner of 2421 Dayton. Let's put this slide back up. So it's approximately right in here on the edge of that tree line. And we do note in the report that we are working to resolve who ultimately will preserve, protect, and grant access to that cemetery. That cemetery does have to be protected and have access granted to it as a historic cemetery, a pioneer cemetery. So we're currently working through that. Ultimately, the city of Ames is not in a position to take over maintenance of that cemetery. So depending on what we can work out, we may or may not choose to bring that particular piece of land in with the annexation ultimately. But just to make you aware that it is there, and we are working through that right now, and we'll have that resolved prior to city council. Some other physical details of the site as far as utilities. There is a water line that currently runs under Dayton Avenue, adjacent to the site, that runs up north to the Eagles Loft Daycare. So there is adequate water service abutting the site. There's also a sewer main which comes up to the southeast corner of the site, which can be extended further north and west. And this is in the Ames electric territory, and electric service would be extended to the site by Ames Electric. The development of the site obviously will require utilities extension into any subdivision. So with that, I think that covers the basis of everything there is to know at this point about the site. And I can take any questions if you have any right now.
Okay, I have a question. Why isn't Ames in the position to take care of the cemetery?
It's not our responsibility under state code. It's a township cemetery, so the city of Ames doesn't take on those kinds of obligations.
Ever?
Not aware of it.
Oh.
So it's
Because if we don't annex it, it's going to be an island. I didn't think we did islands.
it wouldn't be an island because you can see on the area where the trees are, it could be left out and it would just have county on the west side and county to the north.
If you look at attachment C, it's not in. It's in the middle of that part that's going to be, not in the middle, but it's surrounded by what's going to be annexed.
But it's not now. And I don't think we really have plans actually to annex to the west. That's the shooting club. And
Right.
even in Plan 2040, we don't have any aspirations of
Well,
annexing.
what I'm
that
saying
area.
is the cemetery right now is sitting in that part that's going to be annexed.
I understand that. We've moved to this hearing. Staff's position is our recommendation to council would be don't annex the cemetery. It should be left out of the annexation. That's our recommendation. It's
So-
possible the applicant he's still researching different options on its maintenance. It's going to be an outlot in the subdivision no matter what. So there's ways around it, but it isn't incumbent upon the city to inherit township cemeteries and take on that maintenance. We don't have a taxing authority for that. Townships have taxing authorities for that.
They would be.
They don't actually tax for it. They have a taxing authority for it.
Okay, they would still be responsible even if that piece of property was annexed in.
Who's they?
The township would still have
I
responsibility.
do not believe that's the case. That's what we're still
Okay.
researching.
Okay.
I think their political jurisdiction ends as soon as something comes into the city.
Okay,
I understand it. That cemetery has been heavily vandalized and really no protection to it. It was cleaned up this last year a little bit, but it should be taken care of.
I mean, our recommendation is the city doesn't need to be put in that financial position. If city council believes it's in the public interest to do that, they're welcome to choose that option. We usually don't put the city in a position to take on a burden for something that isn't our responsibility, though. So it's a question that's going to be answered. We didn't have that tonight. The maintenance of the cemetery is not really part of the annexation. It's whether the territory meets our standards. We're saying if we did have to take on that burden, staff's recommendation would be to sever that part of the territory and only to annex the portion in the front or the majority of the site, but to leave that part out.
I would think that it'd be a advantage to Ames to promote it and have it a tourist
So that's
attraction.
I guess I have no comment on that. It's just not part of our annexation process it directly. And if city council believes it's a value to the city, they absolutely can take that on. They're the ones that have to budget for Parks and Rec and cemetery maintenance.
Justin, there's a piece on the north parcel which reads Bloomington Cemetery Fence. Can you speak a little bit to that? What is that?
I'm sorry.
Like if you see attachment C
Mhm.
on the north parcel,
Yep.
there's a piece in there which reads Bloomington Cemetery Fence.
Yep.
Can you speak to that?
Yep. So the surveyor on there has indicated just the approximate location there of the outline or the border of that historic cemetery.
Oh, it's part of the same.
It's the same
Cemetery
thing,
that you're
yeah.
talking
So
about?
that polygon up there,
Right
right there, that is literally the cemetery's fenced
Yep.
boundary.
So the cemetery is within that.
Within that fenced area, yes.
Correct.
Okay. So if I understand this correctly, if there's no resolution to this issue before it goes to council, then you might go with like a truncated boundary for annexation, which leaves
We-
this cemetery out.
We won't go to council without resolution. We'll know what the real options are. It's a unique situation. It's been taking a little while to track down who is responsible, what the implications are, and we just don't have final resolution. Really, the property owner is the one that's researching that. Justin's been involved with the county and the township, trying to talk through what it means.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense if for some reason the township is not ready to take ownership or maintenance of that piece. I don't know what the options are that you're researching. But if that was not, you said there could be like a smaller area that's actually annexed. You might not go all the way northwest. That could be an option. So in that situation, in that option, does that then leave out most of the northwest portion, including the cemetery fence boundary, which is sort of in the middle, or just the northwest?
So take basically where the cemetery location is shown, take a line straight up to the notch and take a line straight west
Okay,
to that boundary. Roughly that area would
Okay.
be left out.
okay,
So that
That's-
area is natural area anyways. It doesn't need to be annexed. It's not developable. So it would be consistent in our eyes with not annexing it. It can be in the city. It's not that it can't be. It's just, it's not essential to be in the city because it's natural area anyways.
okay. Which leads me to my second question. Assuming all of this goes well and it's the entire property is annexed in, the property owner would need to go forward with a rezoning request because it comes in as act.
right?
In that situation, the northwest portion is designated as a natural area right now. Would that be kept the same in the rezoning as it comes in, or how would that natural area be treated?
Most commonly, it doesn't get an overlay on it. Theoretically, the environmentally sensitive overlay could be placed on it. But for the most part, they don't have that overlay. Right now, it's only applied to floodways, but it could be applied to other areas if that was desirable.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
I guess I'm curious, there, under development issues, it talks about the shared use path improvements. So are they anticipating a shared use path then along the west side of Dayton? Do you guys know how far up that's anticipated? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, this is coming from the Forward 45 plan. Off the top of my head, I believe it goes up to Riverside.
Okay.
It has it's an MPO transportation plan, so it's a little broader than the city.
Okay.
So I believe it's intended to go up to Riverside.
Okay. I was just curious.
The city wouldn't build that last
Right.
segment. We build it as we
Right.
build out our roads, but
Right.
it is in our plan for there to be a shared use path on Dayton over time.
Okay. Nope, that's what I was just curious about. And then it talks about below the transportation improvements, obviously needing potentially to widen the road and add turn lanes. I'm assuming whoever develops out the site would be responsible for those improvements. Is that typical or?
That would be typical. The applicant has requested, the property owner asked the city council to initiate an RFP process to look at TIF support for small lot subdivisions. They've applied for this to be that project. So if city council made a different agreement, then maybe they're not doing it and the city's doing it or some other arrangement. But if there's no TIF subdivision, then yes, the turn lanes are required of the developer.
Okay. Thank you.
And whoever the developer is will be required to maintain access to the cemetery?
Yeah, so the way, regardless of what turns out, the property owner has no issue with allowing for access and all of that. So whenever it gets subdivided in the future, access to that area will definitely be maintained. It won't be cut off and inaccessible behind some other industrial lot. There'll be an ability to get there.
Won't be isolated.
Well, it'll be on its own, that location. It just won't be, you'll be able to get to it.
From
I mean, we're not,
the east instead of from the north. I guess.
well, when the property develops, there's gonna be roads that connect to Dayton to the east, yes. There won't be a road that connects, well, there's nothing to connect to the north, so there won't be a road that goes all the way north.
And in that notch area that's not going to be included, that's that Eagle Loft, right?
The longer rectangle's already in the city, yes, that's the Eagles Loft daycare.
Or it already is in the
That's
city?
already in the city.
Okay. Okay, the applicant is invited to, or is the city the applicant?
The city is not the applicant. I spoke to the applicant this afternoon. He was not available to be here tonight, so I don't think there's another representative.
Okay. Members of the audience will be invited to come forward to offer comments and questions on this. If you come up to the mic and introduce yourself, and you've already given her a slip, right?
Yes. Hi, so I'm Matt Frank. I live at 2811 Dayton Avenue. So my wife and kids live there. We are due north of the natural area. So we are 16.5 feet away from the property in question here. So it's very, very important to us to be, aware of what's going on here. And it's, I've been keeping an eye on what's being planned or whatever. So I'm really not talking about the annexation. I'm not come up here to talk about the annexation, because really what's important to me is the industrial site plan that this is being prompted for. And that upper northwest corner is very important to my property, our acreage there. That's what we view every day out on the Three Season porch. So that natural area is very important to us. And if that would get affected by this, it would have a significant effect on the property of the value of our property. So I note that paragraph 3 on the commission action form, it mentions about this, that the property is row crop land with a small area of natural area in the northwest corner. When the land use classification was changed last year, the natural area designation was left on the northwest portion of the property. And then it goes on to say that the wish is to have it rezoned as general industrial. So it kind of leaves the question open. And I think Councilmember Minhaus, you brought that up, of what's going to happen to that area. Is it going to continue to have a natural area designation or a separate designation? Because although it's mostly natural area, there's at least about an acre of flat ground that presumably an industrial park member could decide to park a couple propane tanks or things like that. Things that would, again, be very, very undesirable for my family. It's listed on the industrial site plan as Stormwater Area B. And so it seems like it's intended as part of the industrial site plan. So when it's a Stormwater Area B, it makes it sound to me like, one of my questions would be, are they planning on digging it out and creating a separate retention pond with fencing around it and things like that? That, again, would be something I'd really rather not see happen there. There's 2 stormwater areas, Stormwater A, Stormwater B, one to the south and one to the north. Page 4 of the action plan refers to stormwater retention detention along the western edges of the site. It doesn't really completely call out that northwest corner as a stormwater area. So for me and my family, Stormwater Area B, the natural site, which also includes the cemetery. So the cemetery is included in the stormwater detention area, which is a little bit concerning. So that area is very near and dear to me. So I've been keeping an eye on that and watching what the plans are. And I noticed a discrepancy on it. When you look at the site plan, it says that stormwater area is 16.42 acres. I've been on the Beacon GIS site plenty of times and I can't come up with more than 12 acres. So there's some mismatch on the amount of acreage that's being planned for that stormwater area. So again, that's what I rise today to talk about most, is that topic there. On the western portion of 2105 Dayton Avenue, there's a sliver of land. There's a parcel that's 0.94 acres. And before this plan came up, TGFA apparently was the listed owner as the 3 lots. So 2105, 2421, and a very thin sliver, 0.94 acres, which encompasses the entire western portion of 2105. And I just make note that it's not included in the plans at all. Not that it would necessarily have to be part of the industrial site, but it mentions about stormwater detention on the western border. And I just wonder about that sliver of land being left. As Mr. Emery had mentioned about islands being formed, that strip of land is left there between the industrial site and Isaac Walton League. Anyway, the other concern for us, of course, is that they do follow through on the plans for the turning lane to deal with traffic on that road. That road is extremely heavily traveled. Buses carry our kids up and down that road, and there's a lot of very heavy mine trucks that have a difficult time slowing down. And if there were several people turning into this area, that would be kind of a concern there. So, but kind of in conclusion, I not against the annexation, not against the idea of the industrial site. It looks like it would be good for the city of Ames, just have a real concern about how we treat that northwest corner. And I would love to hear that it's contingent on how we deal with that northwest corner, that we either decide to annex it, we not decide to annex it, we do the environmental overlay, but somehow that northwest corner is protected and includes that cemetery. The one positive we see on this potentially is that perhaps this industrial site would finally bring broadband internet up to Eagles Loft, who doesn't have internet, and neither do any of us neighbors. So that's the one thing that we kind of look forward to. We'll deal with the traffic if we can get internet.
You're on that private drive that goes along north
That's,
side.
I own that private drive actually. So that's that paved lane across the top there. I own that.
Okay.
And then we own 7 acres in that northwest off of this. Thank you for listening.
Anybody else in the audience wish to speak on this issue? Okay, the public comment area is closed. City staff, you have any closing remarks?
Nope, I don't have anything further.
No, and the applicant isn't here. Commission, any discussion?
Got a quick question for staff. Is it possible to pull up Beacon or something and figure out that sliver of land that he was talking about and what the situation is?
We asked the owner about it.
Mhm.
They didn't want to include it.
But it is owned by the same.
This, you're talking about the sliver of land that he's talking about on the west
Just on the
side?
on the south quarter, there's a little strip right
here.
there.
just
Okay.
outside of that.
And we asked them and they said they didn't want to include it.
And that's the only piece they own other than these two?
Yep.
Nothing else around?
Right.
Okay.
And as I understand it, with the Pioneer Cemetery, nobody can do anything to it but protect it and maintain it.
I mean, I'm not going to say yes or no. I don't know Pioneer Cemetery law, so no one's proposing to do anything to it. That's what I can say. This is about 0.94 acres of a strip of land that's pretty narrow. Again, we asked them specifically whether to include it or not. They said they did not want to include it. It's about 25 feet wide.
But they didn't give reasoning as to why.
Yeah, this is a couple months ago when we asked about it. When they submitted the first annexation application, we asked about it. Came up during the fringe plan amendment process too, about whether that, I mean, the boundary isn't meant to be defined to within 20 feet. So we said we would just defer it to the annexation process, and they chose not to include it. It could be annexed.
They can always come
But it would have
back
to be-
with it at a later time.
I don't ever see it coming in the city if it doesn't happen now. There's no real reason to bring it in if you're not going to bring it in with this.
Okay.
Anybody else have any more comments? The only thing I can say is I hope that the watershed up there and where it looks like there's a pond, I know that there's almost like a marshy area up there. And of course, the cemetery, I think is a very important item. You know, I ran the whole area when I was a kid, so. But, anybody else have any more comments?
So if you, staff would recommend excluding the cemetery from annexation, is that right? I mean,
If it becomes the city's responsibility for its upkeep and maintenance.
and if it's excluded, the excluded area would run all the way up to and basically capture all the natural area.
Yeah, give or take. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I would envision it.
Kelly, I feel like maybe I'd asked this before, but in terms of that light industrial uses, I guess what all is kind of generally included in that? I mean, obviously, if they move forward with the rezoning,
So
I understand this is just the annexation that is before us, but in terms of anticipating,
yeah, so general industrial will be the likely request.
okay,
So that's the most generic industrial zone that we have. It can be anything from warehouse to office to manufacturing to storage. Those are the four kind of uses you often see in that district.
okay,
And they haven't given you any idea what.
So all of these discussions about how it's actually going to be used, they're just not really part of the annexation process. It's a rezoning question. It's a
Right.
subdivision question.
And
They want GI. They want the flexibility for regular general industrial use.
and that would have to come back to us again.
Yep. So after annexation, presuming council approves it, it's in the city. There will be a separate hearing on rezoning it to GI. If there's an overlay or something like that, that get decided at that time. And they, as far as we know, they intend to subdivide it. So the subdivision would also come back to city council in terms to both the commission and the city council to discuss lot layout and to review the infrastructure plans, including the stormwater plans.
Stormwater and access plan.
If it's
There shouldn't be
subdivided.
any access to the north at all.
There's no public road up there. There's nowhere to go up there, right? So if they didn't subdivide, then you wouldn't see it again after rezoning. So we believe they want to subdivide, so yes, then it would come back.
Do you have a sense from the property owner on their timeline of when they might want to come back for a rezoning?
Well, they've asked the city council to support this TIF-based subdivision. Based on that application, they want to move ahead as early this summer.
Okay. I think he wants to talk again.
Public comment is closed. I'm sorry. Any more discussion?
I think I'm supportive of the annexation, just given that it's completely 100% voluntary. And as far as concerns on the cemetery, as well as how do you deal with that northwest portion where you have the naturally sensitive area or the natural area designation, I think those are things, one will get addressed before it goes to council. And the second one can be addressed during the rezoning process. So I think the property owner, you can stay engaged with the process, work with staff and the property owner of these two lots till the time they come in with the subdivision as well as with the rezoning request and see how that works through and if there's a desire and willingness to put in that naturally, that area designation on the northwest portion. So I think that's something that you can stay engaged with. So I'm supportive of the annexation.
Ruth, any comments?
I agree with the new. I'm supportive of the annexation, obviously, assuming that, again, the rezoning will come before us and we can consider any sort of overlay for that sensitive natural
Natural area?
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I mean, I'm supportive of it too, but yeah, if you, hopefully the resolution, or at least in my opinion, it would make sense to exclude the cemetery and thereby exclude the natural area from the annexation. Then you don't have to worry about the overlay.
I would agree with that, and then just add that hopefully that can be resolved before this goes back to the council. And then it may or may not be an issue at that point. And at that time, the city council could cut out that area if they wanted to out of the annexation.
I agree with Chuck. I agree with Mike. And I guess it'd make more sense to me just to include it if it's not going to be used or anything. And nothing else? At this time, I'll entertain a motion.
With the understanding that there's some other discussion that needs to be taking place regarding the cemetery and the natural area, I would move approval of alternative 1, that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends that the city council approve the 100% annexation of the 2 parcels and abutting rights of way totaling 72.99 acres, rights of way acreage included in calculation, for the properties located immediately west of the Ames corporate limits along Dayton Avenue in Franklin Township, Story County, Iowa, by finding that the proposed annexation is consistent with Ames Plan 2040, Comprehensive Plan, and Urban Fringe Plan, and that subnote A, the matter of the responsibility for the protection of the Franklin Township Cemetery be resolved prior to consideration by the city council.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
So provided that the cemetery is resolved, city council would have a public hearing as early as February 22nd, just as an FYI for those that are watching,
That's just for the annexation.
just for the annexation. And it may not get there if there isn't resolution on the cemetery relatively quickly.
Okay. And thank you for the public comment. Okay, moving on to item number 7, public hearing for the rezone of 525 Southeast 16th Street, across from Menards. Who gets to do this one?
Also, but I'm presenting, I was just hoping Justin could bring up the map for me. Right. So you have here a proposal to rezone to HOC. The land use map has commercial here, and it also has a natural open space designation on it because of the floodplain that also traverses the northwest and the north part of the property line. So with what, can you go to the zoning map? Should be one more down. There we go. So the proposal is to HOC to take it from ag to HOC. You can see on this one where the OE overlay runs across that northeast corner of the site. The HOC would not remove the environmentally sensitive overlay. So the whole property will become HOC with a component HOC plus OE. We support this. It's consistent with Ames Plan 2040. The use of the OE overlay is severely limited. Certain activities can be permitted, but for the most part, it's not usable it definitely isn't usable for buildings, maybe some ancillary functions like stormwater or potentially through other approval processes. Parking, I think for the most part, you're seeing 2/3 to 3/4 of the site being developed and the 1/3 to 1/4 being left alone as it comes in and gets developed. But for tonight, we're just doing HOC zoning and keeping OE on part of the site.
That's it?
That's it.
That HOC would not be trailer park.
That is not allowed in that zone. It's a commercial zoning district. Mobile home parks are only allowed in the RLP, a residential land use designation for RLP.
So Kelly, what type of a landscape buffer, excuse me, is usually required? Since the trailer court is to the west there. It
Yeah,
says,
so HOC has a 20-foot yard requirement on a residential boundary with a commercial zone.
so is this like an opaque
And then
landscape buffer?
So then the planning materials are what we call a high screen. So
Okay.
it's a combination of 6-foot mature landscaping with some trees. The alternative is to include a fence along with landscaping in that area.
Okay.
So I think it kind of depends on site layout, whether the fence is better or the landscaping. and how building and parking lots get situated. But that's the base expectation in HOC.
Okay. So there's the 20 feet and then they'd have to do the buffer on the other side of the 20 feet, or
It's
could they
in
do-
that 20 feet.
It's
So
in the
it's
20
really
feet.
a
Okay.
building setback of 20 feet and then
Okay.
a
So
high
they could do
screen
it with-
requirement on the property line.
Okay, I see.
So normally HOC doesn't have 20-foot setbacks, but it would be required
Because it's
here,
adjacent to the residential.
adjacent to the residential.
Gotcha. When you're working with whoever the applicant is, I'm assuming you guys will be sensitive to like the parking area kind of headlight
So that's what the high screen's intended
to deal
to
with
address
that.
that or ameliorate it to some degree.
Okay.
That's the purpose of that standard.
Gotcha.
And the light bleed anymore, it has to be pointed down.
So
Got it.
yeah, so pointed down doesn't mean you've met the glare standard. It just means it's
Right.
pointed down. So there's a combination of our lighting standards about how much light can be shed across the property line in addition to how it's directed in the first place.
Okay.
So no direct illumination is allowed over a property line.
Going back to that OE sensitive area overlay, you mentioned there are a few things that are allowed and not allowed. Can you speak a little bit more to it? Like, would paving for parking be allowed, or paving for outdoor storage? Maybe are those things that could be put in that under that
So-
overlay, or no?
So a parking lot requires city council approval. So if you were to propose to do a parking lot, you would have to come through as a major site development plan for the whole site. You would have to do a natural area assessment and look at what impacts there would be from developing within that. So at a minimum, you're looking at the floodplain impacts. There could be wetlands or riparian area or something else of that nature that needs to be avoided or mitigated. So to do that, you have to go through all those evaluations and go through a public hearing process to build a parking lot. And essentially, and Justin's floodplain administrator, so he can talk more about exactly what's allowed in the floodway. There's a no rise standard, obviously. If anything was to go in there, you have to model that it doesn't change the surface water elevation. So you have to mitigate that. So there's a lot to that. You'd have to really want to use that to probably be able to justify it. For the most part, I think we've only had one project since we've had the OE go through that effort. And I think they had it as a stormwater facility. So when we did the subdivision where Quick Start's supposed to be located to the east of here, when we did that plat, they have a stormwater facility outside of the subdivision that's in the OE overlay. That was part of the plat review. So if it's in a subdivision, it goes through that process. If it's not in a subdivision, it goes through the major site plan. But that had to go through that same process to allow for a stormwater detention facility to be in that area.
And any solar shading of the property to the west would come up only during the site plan, right?
There's no solar shading standards in Ames. If you mean cast shadow across the property line,
Cast shadow over any solar.
there's no solar access standards in Ames to
Okay.
protect any property from having solar access, or to maintain solar access, I should say.
Is the city done?
I am. The applicant, I don't believe is here for this one either. It's the same guy from the last one, so.
Really?
But, it's not the same property owner. Representative of the property owner is the same for both projects,
Oh.
two different property owners.
And no idea what's going to be built there yet.
From our understanding, so people have asked us what's going on. They have a floodplain fill permit. It needs to be brought. Do you remember how many feet it needs to be brought up before it can be developed?
I don't have that specific number in mind, but they are putting fill in there
Oh,
in the fringe portion of the floodplain to build that up ahead of time. So any development that goes in here in the fringe area will have to meet the elevation protection standard, which is 3 feet above the base flood elevation. So, and that's in the floodplain fringe.
So as we understand it, they're doing the fill now to prepare the site so that it's available, because a site that needs to be filled and zoned is not really saleable. So they're doing this all in preparation of making it saleable or developable, either way.
And then for the floodplain too, there's also going to be discussion of water displacement over into the trailer park.
No, so so we have floodplain regulations
Right.
that are designed to minimize damage to new structures. The floodplain is calculated as being filled, and the extent of the 100-year floodplain assumes that fill is being put there. So the extent of the floodplain really ends right at the 100-year floodplain, ends essentially on that property line between this site and the mobile home park.
Okay.
So displacement that would happen because there's current course of water, but the fill is presumed in the modeling of the floodplain, and there's no analysis of what that local displacement is. That is not a standard that's in the floodplain ordinance.
Okay.
It's only a standard to fill to protect the structure.
And the applicant is not here to make a presentation.
They are not. The only other thing that we put in the staff report was, since there's no development proposed, we don't have driveway locations or anything of that nature. The applicant understands that if they come in for a site plan review or subdivision, improvements on Southeast 16th Street, if they're needed, are their responsibility. But the road's already built to a minor arterial standard, so we don't believe that any significant improvements are necessary. Nothing was really changed with the Menards construction, so we would assume minimal to no improvements are needed to the road. If there was, it would be the responsibility of the landowner.
But that doesn't include the intersection to the west. The traffic signals. On Duff.
Correct. I mean, the city is doing their own traffic and signal improvement project at that corner.
Okay.
I believe it's budgeted for next year. There's nothing else that could be done other than what the city's going to do to that intersection anyways.
Is the applicant required to do some kind of a stormwater study before development or before rezoning?
Well, not before rezoning. So when you do either a subdivision or a site plan, you have to fully comply with 5B. You'll hear us mention that frequently. So that's the full assessment of the site, the conditions of the site, the soils, and then we have mandatory quantity and quality control measures that are required of everybody.
Does 5B take into account some of the recent construction? Like, would they look at if there's been any impact from Menards being constructed on the south side of the street, and how that might have affected?
No, so it's not related
Water.
to the floodplain. It's about your runoff being cleaned and controlled before it's discharged into a waterway or into the storm drain system, whichever one you're connected to. So other people's development don't affect 5B. I think what you're asking is that is the floodplain been reevaluated?
Yeah.
We just adopted new maps.
We adopted new maps right about a year ago.
Okay. And that was post Menards construction? That analysis was done post Menards construction or no?
No, it was based on the terrain from,
I think it was roughly 2008
Yeah.
when it was flown.
so again, the Menards was always assumed to be filled, so it shouldn't change the projected extent of the floodplain.
Mhm.
So what the 2008 updates did was they did a LiDAR model to digitally map the terrains. They'd have better elevations. And it did, if there were changes, that was accounted for in the model, but that's what the updates were for, was to update some of the smaller details. So there's minimal changes across the city from adopting those maps.
Any other commission questions? Okay. Members of the audience, do we have anybody who wants to step forward? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. Any discussion in the members of the commission? Okay. This time I'll entertain a motion.
I'd go ahead and move alternative one, that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the City Council approve the request to rezone the property located at 525 Southeast 16th from A agricultural to HOC highway-oriented commercial and retain the OE overlay for the floodway.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. So carried. Okay, moving on to item number 8, public hearing for the rezoning, primary plat, and site plan of approval of the planned unit development located at 2098 West 190th Street, Hayden Ridge Township project, excuse me. City?
All right. So we have a rezoning request before you tonight that involves applying a planned unit development PUD overlay designation along with a major site development plan and a preliminary plat. And the property owner is 574 Investments LLC. And what they are proposing, as you see there before you, is a 44 lot subdivision that is designed as a planned unit development. The current zoning designation for this property is FSRM, that's floating suburban residential medium. That is the base zone designation. That base zone designation will stay on this property. And so when we say we're doing a rezoning, we're really not changing the base zone designation. We're just applying the planned unit development, the PUD designation, to the property as an overlay. And then along with that comes the plat and the major site development plan, specifically all as part of the plan. So in this particular case, the major site plan will obviously control the development in terms of the structures and the use. There is a preliminary plat now that you're looking at, which will eventually lead to a final plat, which will establish the property lines. And then the planned unit development, the PUD, is all of that and is the design of the proposed development. So this is a relatively new zoning tool. It was created in early 2021, that being the PUD. The purpose of the PUD is that it allows a developer to propose an arrangement of different housing types and lot sizes than would be allowed by the standard zoning. And it also allows for requested deviations to the base zone standards in support of that alternative housing. So I'll go ahead and go through the proposal and explain some things as I go along. You do have just kind of a aside, you do have an email tonight from a neighboring property owner. And so there are some neighboring property owners that do have some concerns and comments. And you do have an email from one of them in front of you to keep in mind going forward. So the proposal is 44 lots. And what you'll see here is that includes 44 units of housing. The proposal is a mixture of townhomes and what we refer to as duplex homes in the report. They're really a bi-attached type of home on their own lot that are arranged here along 190th Street. 190th is up here to the north. The Vintage Cooperative complex is to the west. And this is in the Quarry Estates subdivision up on the north side of the city. This is a conservation subdivision. So up here you do have open space dedicated as conservation area. And you do have some outlot area that comes through the middle of the site that's been left open. and separates the clusters of townhomes and duplexes a bit, and that follows the form of the conservation subdivision, which encourages clustering of housing. So the PUD involves townhome lots that are approximately 1,400 to 3,600 square feet in size. And then the bi-attached, the duplex building lots are about 4,500 to 6,100 square feet, depending. The base zone of FSRM will control still for height, use type, as well as perimeter setbacks. All perimeter setbacks meet base zone regulations here. There are interior setbacks, though, that do differ, particularly the what we call the front and rear setbacks of these homes, which I'll get into. And so again, that's part of the deviations that can be accomplished through a PUD. The open space that's being proposed is approximately 37%, and that includes the central open space area along with the yard area. And there is a small conservation outlot here to the north. That excludes streets. So the private street loop that you see through there is excluded from that calculation. The private street loop is a 22-foot wide private street. Normal local residential street widths are required to be a minimum of 24 feet wide of the travel portion. This is a 22-foot wide street that is still able to accommodate vehicles. It still meets fire protection standards. And it loops through the site. It connects to a joint access road over here, which has a property line that runs down the center of it and has ingress and egress established on it that is shared with the Vintage Cooperative site to the west. And the access would come in off of 190th Street there up at the north. The site also has a couple areas of parking for visitors here in the center, and then over to the east. There are some parking stalls as well. There is a sidewalk network that runs through the site as well. The sidewalk along 190th Street here east to west will connect from the west and connect over to the east toward McFarland. And so that'll complete and fill in a pretty vital sidewalk connection there so that people can walk to the east there. It will also, they'll be provided a sidewalk that will run from this site to the south and east through the conservation area here over to McFarland to the southeast where the outlot comes up to the street. And so that'll provide a kind of a southeast secondary access so that residents can walk to the south and east and walk toward the park as well to the southeast there to Ada Hayden. I'll talk just a little bit about an item that we pointed out in here. So PUDs have compatibility standards to them. And one of the compatibility standards is ensuring that where garages are at, that they are not more prominent or don't protrude forward from entrances. In other words, they're at least flush or set back so that entrances are a fairly prominent feature in terms of a front orientation on the homes. And in this particular case, along the north row of townhomes, these clusters, the developer is requesting a deviation or an exception or a finding actually that the garages be found to meet the standard for design here, in that they are proposing that the north leg of the private street be considered both a street and an alleyway. And in that particular north row, the garages will be will slightly protrude in front of the entryways that face that street. And we do talk a little bit about in there kind of a unique situation here with the way those homes are situated in a through lot type scenario. You've got 190th Street to the north, which is a rural section of road with ditch. And then you've got the middle row of townhomes, which have their garages facing north. And then the front of those homes facing the south leg of the south leg of the loop here, the private street to the south. So what you've got is this already functions as a kind of as an alleyway partially to begin with. And so the developer is asking that that garage design be permitted to exist as they've proposed it. And I'll put some elevations up here in just a moment for everybody to see. Along the lines of those deviations, we do have in the addendum a table that kind of runs through some of the basic deviations. But what you'll notice in there is that we have lot widths that in this particular case are proposed to be slightly smaller than the standard minimum lot width under the base zoning. You also have allowances or requests for allowances for through lots with the design. Some of the lot sizes are smaller than the base zone standards would also permit as well. And then your setbacks, the internal setbacks, your rear and front interior, as the townhomes face each other, is reduced from what typical setback would be otherwise in under the FSRM standards. And then also your street width is reduced from a local public street, which is a 26-foot requirement, to a 22-foot requirement. I will go ahead and put up real quick so everyone can see a view or a look at some of the elevations. So this would be the, I don't know how well you can see those in the light. This would be the north row of townhomes that's proposed. So you see here, these are the garages that are talked about in the report that will face the south. And then this is the view that you would see from the north on 190th. This here then, now that I'm showing, is the middle row of townhomes. These garages here will face north. These are more, this is the more orientated to be a rear with rear access, and the garages kind of flush with each other there. And then this would be the front orientation to the south, along the south leg of the loop street. And then you have the bi-attached, the duplex style homes there, which you'll see to the south, the front elevation with the entryways. There's covered porches, and then the rear elevation there as well. So we list, of course, the land use goals in there as well. And we also list the findings in one of the attachments, as well as the supplemental development standards for the PUD. And with that, I can answer any questions that you might have at this time.
So Justin, I'm just curious, do we have a definition of what a front facade means?
So we,
Like a general definition?
Well, there's a series of things that gets to the front lot line is where you access the property or are addressed. And then the facade that faces the front property line is typically your front facade. So it's a series of definitions based on where the front of the lot is.
Okay.
So it doesn't, I think the question of what that alley is still open, especially mainly because it's a PUD. It's not technically a through lot because there's that conservation outlot out to the street, but they definitely don't have the ability to have access to that street either, regardless. And so that's kind of where we got to with if you call it the front for one, it affects the other. Just the way the layout of these particular three style of homes are. There's clearly other ways homes could be situated to avoid it, but in this arrangement with three different homes, some front loaded and some rear loaded, it brings up this question that's kind of put here in front of you with this PUD. So depending on the outcome of this discussion in alternative 1 or alternative 2, that we'll know how to proceed forward.
Okay. Looking kind of for a general idea of how it's been defined, I guess, but sounds like it varies.
So the applicant is the one that's deciding what's the front and what's the back. The actual front is actually the back, is what he's calling the back, and the back is actually the front.
I think I agree with that. Sorry, if we had public streets, right, the question would be answered because you would have a public street. There wouldn't be a question, is it rear access or not? It would just be a public street, and your front yard would be defined.
And that's the way he's trying to get around this, is by calling it an alleyway and having the
we normally
HOC or whatever you want to call it, or the
PUD.
homeowners association take care of those streets.
And you normally can't have through lots either. So, right. So that middle row of lots, we wouldn't let you plat 2 public streets around a lot. So you can see the sequence of
Right.
the PUD allowing variations in lots is what gets you to this question.
Mm-hmm.
And you gotta help me with this, the last meeting or the meeting before that, didn't we have a long discussion about the garage protrusion?
So when you recommended approval of the PUD overlay, you clearly discussed the compatibility standard, and you supported as a commission not having garages protrude in front of the front facade of a structure. So you supported that, and that is what council approved as part of the standard overall. So yeah, that would have been a few months ago when this was approved back in the summer. You definitely had a long discussion about that particular compatibility standard. So this is the first one through. The last one we did with the Windsor Point Apartments for affordable housing, built condition. None of this was the situation. That the overlay wasn't designed for that. The overlay was designed for this kind of situation, and that's why we're here today. It's the first one through, and as we noted in alternative 1, depending on the recommendation of the commission, a text amendment may be necessary so that we understand how to apply this going forward.
And the north Aikman Drive is narrower than the south Aikman Drive. Correct? The bottom half of the loop is wider than the north one?
No, they're the same width. The street width,
Yes.
they're both 22 feet wide.
I'm kind of at a loss as why he wants to call the back, the front, and the back, other than to just get around a certain, what we agreed to last time, or 2 months ago.
So they're here. You could ask that
Okay,
question.
I will.
That we have this applicant tonight.
Oh, good.
Quick question for you, Justin or Kelly. So the city's conservation subdivision standards, which is what applies as the base to this, if I understand correctly, it says that a minimum of 25% of the overall subdivision must be open space.
Mhm.
If I flip that, it means you can, up to 75% of the subdivision can be built upon. Do we know that with this PUD, what that percentage is going to? Is it still staying within 75% with the streets and
Yes,
with all the paving, it's still under 75%?
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So-
Do we know what that-
So streets aren't, I want to be clear, it's 25% of the lot area minus right of way.
Okay.
So think of the usable land outside of the right of way.
Right.
25% must be set aside as common open space. So the right of way, it's like the public streets are subtracted out.
Is there anything in the conservation subdivision ordinance that speaks to how much can be paved overall on the subdivision?
So the individual zone has a lot coverage per lot. The conservation ordinance doesn't restrict the individual lot, the zoning does. It's making us set aside an extra 15% of the overall development area for open space, where normally 10% is the set aside requirement. And then each lot's controlled by the FSRL or the FSRM coverage standard. So the short answer is we did evaluate when this came in that the total amount of open space in the whole Quarry Estates subdivision is still compliant with the 25% set aside, as well as the lotting requirement. So
Correct.
So there's an extra requirement in a conservation ordinance that 80% of the lots have to front upon an open space. It also meets that in total when you combine everything together.
I guess I'm just thinking that totally makes sense to me. I'm also thinking it just on a slightly different sort of direction in terms of if I take a subdivision, how much of it can be paved, whether it might be streets or buildings or whatever, and what that maximum is allowed, and how putting a PUD on this area changes that or impacts that. That's sort of, especially given the location of this site just on the northwest of Ada Hayden, sort of in that area. So I'm trying to get a sense of what that overall paving impact is going to be in the area. That's kind of where I'm going with it.
So I don't know it's an apples to apples because single family attached is an allowed use, which is obviously much different than single family detached. It's single family detached that has a limit on coverage. Single family attached
Sure.
can cover more because the lot's just smaller by definition. So to get to what you're asking for, I'm not sure I can just pull that off the top of my head. I mean, we would normally assume about 20% of a site is used for right of way. Not all of the width of the right of way is paved. And then roughly 60% of a single family lot can be covered with impervious area or building structures. Clearly, single family attached is a little bit different ratio. And then we require 10% of an FSRM site to be open space. The FSRL also requires 10% of the overall area to be common open space. And then the conservation ordinance takes that 10% up to 25 for the total. So they meet it from the FSRM standard perspective. They meet it on the site, and it plugs into the overall development of meeting that 25% set aside as well. And this was zoned FSRM at the time we approved Quarry Estates. So this section, about 10 acres, was set aside as FSRM as a base zone, and the rest was FSRL. So that was built into the calculations when it was platted as Quarry Estates and when it was rezoned. The overlay is allowing for this mix of housing versus other ways that it could be done.
So
Help.
in the beginning, it was plotted.
Somewhat.
Go ahead.
There's somewhat, I guess I'm not sure I can get my head completely around understanding what's the best way of figuring out what the impact of this PUD would be on the area around. That's kind of where I'm going with it, and I'm not sure I have that.
So I
My
guess
head around that.
if I'm interpreting I'm trying to read your mind, which is hard. But thinking as a planner, I think you're trying to ask, are they getting more intensity
Yes.
through the PUD process
Yes.
than the
Thank
default
you.
development standards
Yes.
would allow. I don't believe so. Do you have the overall coverage for the site? I think when you factor in that you could do apartments with parking lots and you only have a 10% set aside requirement, and you could still plug this into the overall 25%, I don't think you're getting more impervious than you may get in other scenarios. That's my thought without running math on it. I don't think in this case you're getting more. You're not getting more, like substantially more, with the lot dimension relief. I mean, the overall density is still just over 10 units per acre, which is the minimum in FSRM. And if you were talking about upzoning from FSRL to FSRM, yeah, then there's clearly an increment of additional development that would not have happened. But this was base zoned as FSRM.
So Justin, you had mentioned that there's interior and exterior setbacks. So I was looking at, I don't know what page this says, the addendum. And with that, it looks like the interior setbacks that are being proposed then, for the front setback, it's 0 to stoop, 4 feet to the facade, and then 10 feet for the duplexes. So if that's what they're proposing, I would assume then obviously for the units on the north side, the front side of the building would be on the north side then, given those setbacks. So I guess in terms of like interpreting front facade based on what they're proposing for setbacks, it would seem, I guess to me, that the front facade would be on the north side for those north units based on, again, the setbacks they're proposing. And then I guess I'm curious on the south units, they have a 25-foot rear yard setback. And then it says for the interior, they're required to have a 10-foot on site to property line. So what does that mean?
So I think you can see it on here. You see that dashed line that's running through the rear loaded townhomes driveway? I was looking at the north side there.
Oh, okay, I see, yes.
So they have 20 feet, I believe, from garage to paving, but there's a property line at 10 feet out from the garage.
So they're considering that.
Functionally, there's 20 feet from garage door to the road. private
Right,
street,
yeah.
But there's only 10 feet of the driveway on their property.
Okay,
That's what that's trying to articulate.
okay, I see. But they're considering that the rear setback then on the north side of those units?
So you're talking about the middle row, or which row are you talking about?
Sorry, the far south unit. So then they're considering that the rear
The
setback
front-
or the alley
On the
setback?
south row of units, the rear setback is the south facade.
Okay,
The front facade is the north facade on the rear row.
okay. Okay.
That one is clear to all of us, I think.
Yes.
Because we have
I
front
think-
doors opposite of front doors there.
Right.
It's the
It's
other
the
segment of
northern
the road
units.
that
Right.
It's two things.
Okay.
And because that, it's going to be Aikman's going to be a private drive. The city won't have any say on if there's on-street parking or not.
The fire code will, no on-street parking will be permitted. Only in the 90-degree parking stalls will parking be allowed.
Visitor lots or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So the fire code doesn't allow for less than 20 feet for access, so you can't park a car on a 22-foot wide road and meet that standard.
Quick question involving streets. Aikman, do we know what the cross section of the pavement's going to be? Is it going to be similar to what's to the west where it's 6 to 7 inches PC or?
I've got that. So there will be, Aikman will be 7 inches of, it'll either be PCC or HMA.
Okay.
Then there is subgrade underneath that.
Oh,
as
okay.
well.
And then my other question, and it looks like the right of way for 190th Street is the north lot line. Would be correct?
About right there.
Yeah, right along there.
Along the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so looks like there's probably plenty of room then. At some point in the future, they're probably gonna want to widen that to a 31-foot back-to-back curb and gutter section. Once it develops further to the north, to the north. So yeah, that doesn't look like that'd be a concern.
Any other questions? Okay, we now invite the applicant to speak.
Well, good evening, Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Luke Jensen. I'm the applicant, and I'm glad to be here this evening. I'm representing 574 Investments, which consists of the Friedrich and Jensen families, and we have a history together of developing high-quality real estate communities here in Ames. It's good to be back in front of you guys with an exciting project. Justin did a great job of outlining kind of the high points of it, but just to summarize a couple of things, we've got 44 homes, 3 different types of units that range in size from about 1,435 square feet up to a little over 1,660 square feet. That would be the ranches on the south side. All will be 3-bed, 2 or 2.5 bathroom. 2-story will be on the north 2 units or north rows of homes. And as I mentioned, the south row will be single-story units. As it's kind of outlined in the report, we've worked with staff to develop the different concepts. We've provided ample outdoor space and connectivity to Corey Estates, and through that would be down to Ada Heritage Park. We think this is a pretty efficient and functional use of the land. As was outlined, we're near the minimum density for this 5-acre site, just a little bit over 10 units per acre. And then also this is in alignment with the updated 2040 plan. With the 3 different types of units, we see 3 price points. Our goal is to try to meet a new construction price of high 200s for the units on the north, and then they'll be into the mid to upper 3s as we work a little bit further to the south. Types of buyers is a really broad segment of our market. We see downsizing, empty nesters, and first-time home buyers being attracted to this type of community. These units have been built a lot in central Iowa. So throughout the Des Moines metro, hundreds of this type of unit has been developed and built, moved in, and enjoyed by their owners. Our desire is to start construction here in the spring of 22 when it gets a little bit warmer. As Kelly and Justin outlined, we knew that the PUD process would have some discoveries with being one of the first projects through the process. And I think that we've worked together well to develop a thoughtful plan and looking for areas where there might be compromise, and we share staff's opinion that our plan is the right one here. Just a comment on adjustments, or one of the alternative 2s in the report. To change the north would be a pretty big redesign. We showed these plans early on in some conceptual, and felt that this was a good variety of units. And so if we went to 2 product types, I think that would lose some interest in variety, and it wouldn't achieve the goal of our PUD. If you guys, I know that this recommending board contributed to authoring the PUD plan. And as one of the first projects through, I think we can see that it provides some accommodation for creative and thoughtful ways to use land. So yeah, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So the only reason why you're calling the front, the back, the front on that north side is just to get around one of the PUDs.
Well, it's the interior setbacks
Yes.
essentially.
Yes.
It's one of the required interior setbacks.
Yeah, I don't want to use the word getting around. That's not our intent at all. It's that we're using this developed tool to provide a housing variety that allows for accommodations such as this. So let's just say if we were to reverse that plan and have the front doors on the north, that's going to have a lot of sidewalk and interaction in through the conservation area to get over to the sidewalk to the north. If you look all along, especially as you go to the east, those are all those homes are rear facades of those houses. So this is in alignment of that north boundary of the property would be consistent as you work from the entry of Ada Hayden, the townhomes just to the east, all the single family as you work up to McFarland, which is the next intersection there to the east.
What I'm getting at, we worked hard on getting on the discussion of setbacks of the garages.
Yeah.
And seemed to be what the city council wanted, seemed to be, everybody was in agreement that the garage is being set back from the front door is a lot more attractive anymore than what in the past has been built around Ames.
Well,
You know,
I mean-
back in the, previously, the garage was the focal point.
Yeah.
And the city council and many people didn't like that. And so
Yeah.
they brought it up and we
Yes,
changed that.
Would you be willing to pull up the elevation of the units in question?
Yeah.
So if one of our goals is to create these little bit smaller lots and have attached housing plus attached or attached garages. So I think maybe some of the challenges that the community's faced in the past is where the garage was literally pulled in front and the house was in behind that. This is a way to get I think these are 30-foot wide units, maybe a little bit narrower. And a garage itself is 22 feet wide. So that's a difficult standard to meet whenever you're working in a tighter environment. So the garages are an aspect of it. I hope we can see that that's not, in my opinion, the emphasized or the featured part of that. We've tried to provide gables, covered porch or covered stoop over the entryway to provide an architectural interest to the facade.
You're talking about to the north side
Talking about,
of the north side of the north properties.
I'm speaking to the south side of the north properties.
But still, the garage is forward of the entryway.
Yeah,
The
it's
true entryway.
correct. It's about 8 feet. The door, there's a covered entry. I don't have a pointer with me, but there's a covered stoop, and then the garage or the entry door to the home is maybe, I think the report said 15 feet off of the front facade of the garage.
So again, the garage is the focal point of the house.
That could be an opinion. I disagree with it. I think that if you look across the massing of those 4 units, yes, there's garages, yes, there's gables, yes, there's entry doors. I think it's comprehensively an appropriate elevation of this type of housing.
So I guess my confusion is, I understand kind of the layout and some of the restrictions that you probably have. So I guess my confusion is you've set the front setback, obviously, at a certain amount. And so I would anticipate then that, again, the front facade would be on the front setback side, I guess, of the actual building. In which case, that would mean those northern units, the front facade would be on the north side of the building.
Yeah.
So then those garages that are on the internal side, I don't see those as necessarily an issue because they adhere to the rear setback.
Yeah. Um,
Do you see, I guess, what I'm,
so this is the north units that we have shown here.
yes, correct. So
Yep.
like what I'm saying in terms of the proposed setbacks for the interior side, you're showing again the front setback, which again, I'm interpreting the front setback as the front facade of the structure. And so I would consider the front facade of the structure actually that north side of those northern units. I guess maybe that's just my interpretation based on the setbacks that you're,
I have to look at the
Proposing.
setbacks, but I view this as front elevation would be the south side of the north units.
Because that's where your front entrance to the house is also
Yeah.
located at.
Yep.
So it's more of a primary entrance that dictates the front facade.
okay, but usually you would address off the front, like if often on a corner lot, you have maybe, again, whatever the address side, that's your front.
Yeah.
And that's where it's addressed off of. So this is where I feel like I'm getting conflicted is, I guess, the front setback is not being distinguished based on the actual, again, front facade or the address side.
So it's going to be addressed off at Aikman.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the public street is obviously the north facade. I don't know if that's what you're thinking of from an orientation perspective, as the front faces the public street, but from an addressing perspective, it is Aikman,
Right.
which again, where's the primary entrance is, but
Right.
then if that's again, remember, it's one of the floor plans is not going to work if that's the definition. Alternative 2 talks about you can do the unit differently, or you could put a unit in that has a front door facing the north, and leave the garage as is on the south side. I think that's one of the 2 ways to address alternative 2, which then you would have the primary entrance on the opposite side of the garage, and then it complies with the compatibility standard. Like that's what the middle units are.
Right. I guess that's what I would lean towards, just given you could still have an entrance on the rear as well, but then the front would obviously be the north side. It would then adhere to your proposed setbacks for the interior side. And you would also then not have the issue of the garages that are interior facing essentially conflicting with the PUD itself.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh no. I'm just having a hard time again, like making all the
Yeah.
pieces fit together.
So I think the report outlines that on the north side, that Aikman is treated as an alley for the units in the middle and as a drive for the units on the north.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same road. It has two different terms for it. And it's based on which side of the road that you're on is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if we were to flip it around or to have the primary on the north, it's going to change the unit type. It's not going to provide the variety of units that we're looking to do. And then you're going to have a lot of, every one of those entry doors is going to have a sidewalk, and that creates privacy concerns, maintenance concerns, and you're going through a conservation easement that seems unnecessary.
So there is no true entrance on the north side of the north lots.
No, there's not a true entrance. There's a back patio, but there's not an entrance, like a public entrance, I guess. I don't know what the right,
A front door.
a front door.
Mhm.
There's a sliding patio door.
Yeah, the phrase is the primary entrance is what the compatibility standard uses as the phrase. It doesn't say front door or rear door. It just says primary entrance. That, as Luke said, that's a sliding patio door on the north facade, not and it's not connected to a sidewalk, so therefore it can't be the primary entrance. So the primary entrance has to connect to a sidewalk system. That's the way that compatibility standard was written. So that's where adding the primary on the north side triggers, you need to then connect it to the walk in some fashion. There's a variety of ways to do that, but it does need to then connect to something. So it's not just a standalone door that leads to grass that
Right.
might architecturally look like the front more than this, but it doesn't get to the heart of what the primary entrance is.
And that's what you're trying to do, is call the front, the back, and the back, the front.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've been calling it the front the whole time. So the front is on the south side. It's not on the north that the compatibility standard, I think, is asking for. And so we've reviewed this through staff, and I think their recommendation is right. This is the first time we've had this type of project come through our community. I really hope there's more, because there's some real benefits that we can do to achieve this type of housing in Ames, that other communities are building hundreds of these units, doing laps around us, and we need to have some level of accommodation and just like refinement to these tools that we have, so we can see more activity, more investment, more opportunities for people to be in our community.
So then for those northern units, how do you propose then, if you're calling the front, the back, then the back, the front, then literally those units don't meet the rear yard setback on the north side as they're shown right now?
Yeah. Can you talk through the setbacks, Kelly? I'm
Then
not.
that would be considered a deviation, because they have an outlot that is 25 feet from 190th Street. So the way we looked at that is if this was approved, the perimeter front setback expectation of the site is accomplished with the conservation outlot. And then they're proposing, was it really 4 to 6 feet is the edge of the building then to that outlot. So they would be asking for a deviation from that rear setback along the north property line. If that's the take on this, that's what it would be. But because of the outlot, it does meet the minimum 25-foot requirement, regardless of what you call the facade.
The Aikman empties out on the north Aikman.
So there's no sidewalk along the south side of Aikman Drive on the north, right?
Right. That's because there's no pedestrian entrance on that side of the street. So the pedestrian entrance, there's a sidewalk wherever there's a pedestrian entrance, or the primary entrance would be the better term. So again, that's that alley function. South half, is it a street? On the north half, it's half.
See, I'm not sure I get that. I know what you're trying to do with it, calling it the front or the main street for the units on the north and treating it as an alley for the units in the middle row. I'm not able to get my head
So that's
that.
So that's the question, right? That's where
Yeah.
we got to as staff, looking at the designs and different options. There's a question that's on the table. Essentially, is this consistent with the PUD compatibility standards? The way we look at it is, if it is, we need a text amendment to clarify that, so it's not an argument next time it comes through. If it doesn't meet the standard, then alternative 2 is the answer, because that's not going to change the code, and that's going to say you have to find a way to have a primary entrance that meets the compatibility standard. So I think that's the best we could get to in working through with what's proposed and how we understood the code when it was written. And that idea of the middle lots being a through lot just kind of throws the whole thing into a different state of understanding where the facade or alignments need to be. If there was 4 rows of houses, I think it'd be obvious to all of us what's expected. The 3 changes it a little bit. The lack of access to 190th, maybe persuade the developer to not think of that as a front door, because it is that particular street section with the conservation easement. There's different factors there. but that's why we're here, is that the commission thinks we comply or not. And then we'll go forward from there on how to address that recommendation.
Are there going to be sidewalks
You go to this side.
along the backside where the main entrance is always going to be where that garage is?
Okay.
Is there sidewalks going to be there?
Well,
On
there's-
all of them?
There, certainly there's sidewalks. I think there's a lot of sidewalks, but Justin's going to pull up where they're specifically at, but
So there's sidewalks on,
there's, yeah, 2 sidewalks on the south. Can you flip that? I can't.
Yeah. Get it rotated here. There we go.
There's 2 on the south, 1 on the north. So the primary entrance of every one of those units has direct access to a sidewalk. And then, as you can see, the sidewalk connects to the north and then again to kind of to the southeast into the neighborhood.
Okay, the dark.
Yeah.
yeah, the darker
Okay,
strips are the walkways.
Yep.
So I guess for me, I just feel like the north units don't actually meet the setback requirements that they're proposing. So that's one of the major issues, like in terms of defining the front facade. Even if they want to try to argue that the south side and allowing the garages to be on that front facade, the back ends don't meet the rear setback requirements anyways, because they're 4 to 6 feet. And the requiring, again, the proposed is 10 feet. So,
So the way that's described in the addendum table, it was trying to differentiate the 2 sets of units. Their proposal is 4 for that row, 10 for the others. It's not that
for the rear yard,
for that north row of homes, the way we describe that north facade is the rear, and it has a 4-foot proposed setback. They're not
okay,
proposing 10 for everything. They're proposing 10 for 2 sets of units and 4 for 1 set of
Okay.
units. And what I was talking about is that as a PUD, they must have at least 25 along 190th
Right,
Street as
right.
the perimeter, and they accomplish that with the
conservation
outlot.
easement. I see. That makes more sense. Sorry,
Yeah.
in terms of the way the addendum was written, that was not clear that, again, the north units are being essentially separated into their own special sort of situation. So,
The drive along the west side, that's a shared drive with the Vintage,
It is.
and that's the way it's always set up.
Yep. That's the way that was approved by the city.
So that has not changed at all.
The drive has not, no.
Is that drive also a private street?
It's not. So
It's public.
this was a single 10-acre parcel lot. It was divided off into the piece that the Vintage Co-op is on. It's in an independent senior living facility approved by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. When we created that lot, it was mandatory that there's shared access off of 190th Street. So when the 2 lots were created, 1 point was assigned as the shared driveway for both properties. They built the whole driveway because they had to build it to build their project, but it's a shared driveway. And the private street standards, those were created when we adopted the PUD this summer. So the standards that are with the townhomes, I'm not even sure we would have called that a private street when Vintage was being built, because it was a driveway to serve a multifamily building. It was not used for lotting purposes. So we have a standard for driveways in the zoning ordinance, and then we have street standards in the subdivision code. So that driveway was treated as a drive because it served a site rather than multiple lots that needed to have front on a street.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Not of the applicant. I have one for staff.
Okay,
So if I may, sir, just under attachment G in the staff report about the PUD is intended to allow flexibility in zoning districts and general standards where design flexibility helps further the goals of the comprehensive plan and is incompatible with its surroundings. And then there's a whole list of things. So in conclusion, I think that we achieved that. Much of our shared goals are in alignment with this plan. Thank you.
okay, members of the audience, do we have any, anybody that wishes to speak?
Good evening. Thank you for having us here. My name is John Strum, and I'm a member of the Vintage Cooperative at 5900 Hyde Avenue in Ames. And what I'm about to read can be considered a composite of our membership's concerns. We are here this evening to address the request from 574 Investments LLC to approve a planned unit development for the property located at 2098 West 190th Street. We are all members of the Vintage Cooperative of Ames, a 55-plus senior living community located immediately west of the proposed development on 190th Street. Our membership has been aware of this proposed development since September of 2021. We believe our membership is supportive of the development of this new neighborhood with one major exception. Through discussions with Mr. Friedrich about this proposed development, we learned that our private driveway to our community would, in this proposal, also serve as a private driveway for the 44-unit development. The proposed drawing of the development indicates two entrances and exits from the private driveway to access the loop road design, Aikman Drive, providing access to the 3 rows of townhomes within this new neighborhood. Our membership has a high level of angst about this private driveway aspect of the development. The primary concern of our membership is their personal safety due to increased traffic flow in and around our community, including our private drive, as well as the safety of their pets when walking them. In researching and making decisions about the possibility of purchasing into our retirement community, we visited open houses in many similar communities. All of them had private driveways. Residents talked to us about the positives of living in their community, and the importance of personal safety and security was emphasized time and again. The safety and serenity we have come to enjoy in our community has resulted in a comforting and peaceful quality of life. Our specific concerns include the following. 1, this proposal includes access to the new development via a shared driveway. Sharing the northeast drive off of 190th will make both entrances to Vintage open to the public. Vintage's private drive will become a public street. The proposed 2 entrances exits from Aikman Drive onto the current private drive will create increased traffic at our northeast driveway access to 190th Street and our southwest driveway access to Hyde Avenue. While I recognize the distinction between private drive and public streets appears to be a matter of width and who owns responsibility for maintenance, the reality is that vehicular traffic will go both north and west from the development's loop drive. The volume of traffic on this private drive around our building will increase considerably. The wear and tear on the private drive due to increased traffic volume will also be significant, and the cut-through traffic we previously battled prior to installation of the stoplights at the corner of Hyde and 190th will once again become normalized. Entry and exit from our underground parking garage will become more difficult and dangerous because of the increased traffic. Available space for snow removal will also be impacted. Future parking usage and restrictions are unclear. Will parking become a free-for-all This is in our drive, the drive we have now. Currently, we need to empty our garage at least twice a year for cleaning purposes, and we use that circle drive. How will overflow parking from our community or the new neighborhood be managed? Let's face it, human nature being what it is, drivers will take the shortest route to get to and from their homes and destinations. Our quiet retirement community, currently very safe for members seeking personal exercise or walking their dogs, will be negatively impacted due to increased traffic. A temporary construction entrance off of 190th Street will need to be established for this development to move forward. Otherwise, the damage done as a result of heavy equipment access through our current northwest driveway onto the development site will render that driveway useless to our membership. Why couldn't this construction entrance be located so that it can become a permanent entrance upon completion of the development? We have been told that a separate access driveway from the development onto 190th Street to accommodate vehicular traffic to and from the 44 housing units is not feasible. Why not? Cannot the loop road through the development be reversed and end with an access to the east on McFarland Street? We recognize that 574 Investments LLC has legal access to the easement as part of the purchase of the property. We were not aware that the private driveway we have enjoyed was in fact split in two by an easement, a fact that the developer of our community, Ewing Properties, never saw fit to share with anyone at Vintage Cooperative of Ames. We discovered this fact as part of an initial visit with Mr. Friedrich about the development. We later learned through our own research that the original easement was established in 2018 when the property was owned by Quarry Estates, LLC. Property was then sold to Ewing Properties for the development into a 55-plus senior living community, which is now the Vintage Cooperative. An easement agreement filed with the Vintage Cooperative of Ames and Harvest Investments, LLC, dated June 10th of 2020, was an agreement between the developer serving as an interim director of our community, as our local board had not yet been formed, and the vice president of Harvest, LLC, who works for the developer. It appears to us the property was subsequently purchased by 574 Investments, LLC. In any event, the news that one half of our private driveway is in fact now owned by 574 Investments was a major shock. It appears to our membership that little consideration for the quality of life of our members has been taken by our former developer. It is our hope that an alternate access to the proposed development can be determined to protect the safety and serenity of our community. Thank you. And I believe there will be some other comments from our other residents that are here.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the audience?
Good evening. My name's Mike Brennan. I also live at 5900 Hyde Avenue, and John basically said everything that I was going to say, so I'm not going to bother. The one thing I would like to do is, Justin, if you could just put a pin up on the South Aikman, on the east end of Aikman. And just picture someone getting up in the morning, heading to Iowa State University and driving to the west over to the private drive that we share with Friedrich here at Vintage, and stop right there. And what you technically need to do is turn right and go up to 190th Street and then go west over to the light and then take a left and get back on Hyde and go back into the Iowa State University if that's where you work. What people are going to do is right where Jason has his mark is they're going to take a left at times. Some people are. It's just human nature to use that shortest path. And that's exactly what we want to get away from, is being a cut through. We talked about safety. We talked about wear and tear on our drive. It's just something that is going to be a huge problem in our minds. If you could continue, Jason and Justin, I'm sorry, and take the left and go around the corner and keep going. You're now on our property. It's private property. I don't know how we're going to keep people from doing that. So It's one of the reasons that we're quite concerned about this. Thank you very much.
Do we have any more? Public?
Thank you for hearing us tonight. My name is Bob Asperry, and I also live at 5900 Hyde Avenue, which is Vintage Cooperative. Again, you've heard most of the data about our place. I wanted to bring up a separate issue, however. We have had a lot of subdivisions being built out in that area, and as you know, that brings a lot of traffic, which is all planned and worked for. They're still being built. The temporary lights that they put up at the intersection did a lot to slow traffic along 190th and also solve the problem with the Gilbert student traffic coming north on Hyde. However, it slowed the traffic on 190th, so it really doesn't function as the major county road that it used to. It still gets you where you want to go, but traffic is slowed. With the stoplights, the speed limit was reduced in that area. And as I feel that as they put in this subdivision, complete the other ones to the south, build the one to the west of Hyde, and then on to the south of that, the traffic around that area is going to get much more congested. And indeed, they're going to do a study, I think, for the intersection and the speed limit in that area this fall. We would like to see this decision either delayed or the study done early so that the remedy for this situation is actually takes into account all the traffic that's going to be, which is coming up pretty fast. You heard him say they were going to start construction in spring. So we would ask that you defer your action or ask the council to defer their action until that study is done. The other thing we're worried about is the maintenance of the road. As Mike pointed out, the private road maintenance is ours. We'll have to have some kind of an agreement with the HOA or whatever they come up with on this if that street is put in place. We still suggest that with the lowered function of the road, as far as the traffic it carries and the speed limit of 190th, that perhaps access to 190th could be made directly to that. I know when the city first did their study that they said you couldn't have an entrance between our entrance and the next McFarland, the next street. But as that the status of that street degrades, we think that's possible. So again, another reason for perhaps deferring action. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other members of the audience wish to speak?
Yes, good evening. Yes, I'm Justin Peters and also live at 5900 Hyde Avenue in the Vintage Cooperative. And I just simply wanted to emphasize something that's already been said before by John Strom, but this proposed access using what is now our driveway is really a non-starter for us. If one looks, in fact, before we purchased our units in this cooperative, we were, Ewing urged us to look at their other developments around Iowa and see how we like them, which we did. All of us did that. And we drove down to Des Moines, where they have Ankeny, Des Moines, on Beaverdale, and so forth, looked at Ewing developments. All of them were very nice. They had private driveways, and that safety issue was tantamount for many of us. If one looks at within Ames here, for example, there's another senior living cooperative very similar to ours, the Village Cooperative on Oakdale Drive. You look at that, that has a private driveway. Okay, in fact, if you look at all of the senior living or independent living or assisted living communities here in our city, I think you will find all of them have private driveways because that is a major safety issue for people who are older. Some of them are frail and trying to walk around, get a little bit of exercise, and they don't want to, have to be menaced by traffic. And let's not delude ourselves here that with 44 units, which have been planned, could be 88 cars parked in this area, plus other vehicular traffic coming in and out, delivery vehicles, friends visiting, parties perhaps. There's going to be a substantial amount of parking, a substantial amount of traffic there. And it really is I think a threat to many of the residents. It could affect resale value of our properties. Okay, as I said, when we moved in, we believed we had the security of a private drive. So, as I say, I think for all of us, this is an issue, an essential issue, and I hope it's one that the P&Z will take seriously.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the audience who wish to speak?
This was,
Ma'am,
Yes.
who are you?
what?
Who are you and where do you live?
I'm sorry. My name is Ann Markoulis, and I live at Vintage Cooperative of Ames, right next to the proposed development. We received an email today from one of our members saying that he sent an email to the Planning and Zoning Commissioner about this proposed development east of Vintage Co-op of Ames. And I just thought it would be appropriate to read you his email, which has already been sent to your commission somewhere, but I thought it would be appropriate to read it in
We don't
conjunction.
really read things into the record. So they have I assume it's the same person who's the email from that I gave you today.
John Armstrong.
John Armstrong, is that?
From
who you-
John Armstrong.
Yeah, so we don't really read things into the record. They have it as a written copy already. So
Okay.
just referencing the John Armstrong email is really all that's necessary.
Okay, so his email does address safety issues from the construction viewpoint also, not just inconvenience and safety for members. All right, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the audience who wish to speak? Okay, the public comment is now closed. And now city staff and the applicant will have an opportunity to speak again. Closing remarks.
So usually the applicant will come back up and have their chance to say their
Okay,
parting thoughts. And we really just have here to answer questions. We don't have more to
sir, do you have any, you want to say a little something again?
Just real briefly. I think it's, we did meet with the the folks here at a workshop, and I think it was Monday, Kurt's an email out to the leadership team there, and just offered to sit through and talk through some of these issues that they raise. Some of these are things that can be resolved, and some of them are the access is something that has been established by the city. And we did a traffic study, a traffic report, and it indicated that this was the safest location for a new spot of access out of this subdivision. So I think a desire as a local developer, I don't know Mr. Ewing, is we want to provide quality housing and quality experiences and be good neighbors and get through the construction process. So I think that was mentioned of a construction access to reduce the wear and tear off the shared access. That's very much in line of our thinking too, is to provide that and keep as much as we can the construction activity and reduce that interference with the property owners to the west. And so we're on standby to continue to try to find and reach resolution. But there are limitations of what we can do just based on the site constraints and the other approving bodies that look into this and know this stuff better than I do. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kelly, is that a private drive or is it a street?
The driveway.
Driveway? But it's, when it was approved, it was put in as a shared drive?
Yes, so it was required when 2 lots were created that there be only one access point, and they chose to propose it in a way where the lot line split it, which isn't unusual, and then an easement was recorded over the north-south leg. It does not extend, as they said. There's no easement that extends all the way out to Hyde. That is their private drive. It's only the 190th north-south component that's a shared driveway.
Just what's shown.
Yeah, and as it curves to the west, that's not part of the easement.
Kelly, at the time that the easement was established, was there any sort of, again, agreement put together in terms of the maintenance?
No, so the city doesn't require that per se. When in the order that this was done, that is not required.
Okay.
In terms of the HOA, because there's now a private street with multiple owners, then there is more expected with the final plat. But because this was viewed as a shared driveway between 2 large parcels, and it's not a street, that'd be very common across the city. And we don't, as a city, require, other than the easement be granted, we don't get into the maintenance responsibilities.
So who constructed both sides of that?
The developer of Vintage Co-op built it.
Built both sides, even though the one side is on the other lot.
They own both lots.
And so
Okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
But then they sold the lot. And
They
now,
sold this 5 acres to the LLC that's proposing this project.
okay.
So there is no like surviving shared maintenance agreement in place now.
If there is, we're not aware of it because we're not a party to it. And I don't know that anybody shared one with us, but I'm not saying it doesn't exist either. It's not something the city is typically involved in.
Yeah. Would something like that get recorded?
I mean, when they owned both properties when they built the road, so I don't know what their thought process was about needing to provide for its long-term maintenance. I think there's because of the series of how things were done and changing expectations over time, you get to this. If this had been all planned at one time, we wouldn't be in this particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
We have private drives in other parts of the city. Again, we're commonly not part of the maintenance program or how those responsibilities are divvied out either.
So if anything off the map, Vintage has control of, and they can do anything they want with.
I wouldn't say anything, but it is under their control. The fire department has concerns sometimes, but I mean, if they want to put traffic control in or other things like that,
Speed bumps or anything like that, they can.
I would say that can be done without talking to the fire department.
Right. So if they wanted to put in a private gate, essentially, they might need a Knox box or something like that. So that
Probably.
emergency
Yeah. So if you put a
access.
gate in, emergency access would have to be provided for. Yes.
But that way it could restrict potentially access to that west drive for
So yeah.
folks.
So if
coming-
Vintage chose to manage their drive,
Right.
they would work with staff to make any changes to the driveway, or like you said, if they put in a gate, does fire expect access, emergency access options? Those things could be looked at.
So the co-op itself would have to be involved with that, doing the access to the drive.
It's their driveway.
That's their drive. Okay.
Mhm.
That answers that question. Any other questions of staff? And discussion.
A lot going on here.
In terms of the project itself, like I'm supportive of the project. I think it's what the PUD is for. And you can get the setback. I get what you're saying, but I think you can you accomplish by including that other space. You get to the 25 feet. So I think when you look at the entirety of all that, to me, that it makes sense, and it does allow for 3 different types of housing. For me, the most serious thing is the drive and and I can empathize with Vintage. I would have concern about that too, but I think there are ways to mitigate that.
Yeah, I feel like this development definitely meets a need out there that I feel like we've discussed over and over again. The limited housing options that the city of Ames, has had. So I definitely feel like the development meets a need. I do have concerns about potentially setting a precedent with the garages. But again, I don't know if that just involves going back and reworking some of the language in that PUD overlay, or if we just want to, I don't know. Again, I think city staff is looking for some sort of direction there, maybe, Kelly?
Well, I think it depends on if alternative 1 or alternative 2 is your recommendation. Again, alternative 2 would not necessitate any text amendments. Our opinion is if you pick alternative 1, we should follow that up with a text amendment to explain this
Gotcha.
situation or why this would be okay or not okay in the future. Something that we don't come to you again with, we don't know what to call it.
Right.
I agree. I agree with both of you that the development is good. I don't care for much for the shared drive, especially if they can't come up with something to stop them from going west over to Hyde. And as she said, I have a problem with just calling the front the back, the back the front, and changing things just so it's simple, to get around something. And like I said, we worked on that garage setback, talked about it extensively before. And I hope the applicant will go back to Vintage Co-op and talk to the people again and try to work something out to keep from having traffic go on Vintage property. And if not, I hope the Vintage Co-op does something to stop it. Mike, you had anything?
I kind of agree. I'm kind of with Doug. I'd like to see, I think it's a great it'd be a great asset to the community, the development. I would love to see something take place with between Vintage, between the Vintage Village and the developer in figuring out something they can do, whether it's a combined or maintenance agreement, or if it's some sort of gate that would, slow down or eliminate traffic. Because I can certainly understand their issues.
Anything else?
No, I mean, I think
I think I'm like I said, I think there's just a lot going on with this property, both in terms of essentially we're trying to look at the rezoning and apply the PUD overlay to this, which would allow them to do a bunch of things. So that is number one, is have that PUD overlay approved or denied from our end. The second part of it to me is the design and site layout of how it's working and whether or not it meets some of the compatibility standards within the PUD overlay that we have talked about, garages being one, the lot width and the other pieces being the other, and so on and so forth. And then the third piece is, to me, is this interface with the property on the west. And how do we make that how do we make that safer and address concerns on both sides? To me, if I go in that order, and tell me if I'm thinking right, Kelly, in that order, the rezoning to PUD, I think I'm for it. Again, I agree with all of you. I think this will allow them to be a little more creative and be a little more flexible in the way you can design this space. And so in that sense, I'm totally all for for rezoning and applying the PUD overlay to it. Where it comes with the compatibility standards, I think I really don't want to sit here and design your site for you and say how that needs to be done. But I feel like some of those things you might be able to address it through just designing the site a little bit differently. And to that extent, like even if you just look at, I said I will not design your site for you, but I still have a few things in mind that I'm thinking of, is when you look at just adjusting the width of the lots, when you narrow those, get them narrower, it becomes difficult to put the building footprint that will allow you that garage entrance from the front and the front entrance to the house on the same side, and yet keep that garage from protruding too much outside, because now you have a narrower lot. So some of it is just picking the right building footprint plan that you want to fit on that lot. So I don't know how far you are in that design process, if that's even an option to look at some of those building plans again to see what might be a better fit for the lot width that you desire, so that the number of lots and the number of units you're creating on the site still stick to that 10.44 unit per acre density that you're looking at with the PUD. So you'll still get that, but maybe just that building plan needs to be looked at again and see if there's more options. And I don't know if that's something they can continue to work on, even beyond the PUD rezoning approval, or if that needs to come together at the same time. So that might address some of the compatibility issues, I feel, because that might even help address some of that site layout, that goofy thing with that front and back and front and alley drive, because of that middle section of units that you have. Again, I don't know, it's probably pushing you backwards again quite a bit, but I don't know if that's even an option, both from the city side as well as from the applicant side. Finally, the third piece is definitely with working with the property on the west side. If the east-west section on the south side of Vintage is actually a private drive, then maybe there might be some traffic mitigation methods that you can explore, maybe with the city and even with the applicant for that matter, to try and figure out if that's something that can be addressed in some traffic. How do you regulate that? Because if you do have that north-south as the public street, I agree that if that street on the east-west is also open, people are going to take that if they need to. So I think that's a bit of a traffic management sort of piece that may have to be worked out. It's just that it's a little too late. Again, like you said, if both of those properties or lots were developed at the same time, it would be so much easier to figure out these circulation patterns and stuff. But we're just a little late in that sequencing, so you'll have to figure out what can be worked out. Going back to Kelly, the compatibility, and can we do a PUD approval, but they can continue to work on the site layout and the building footprints, or that has to come together at the same time?
So you can bifurcate it, but in this case, they're so detailed, the master plan level approval doesn't really advance the project. So we have another PUD that's coming due this spring where they don't have all the building details figured out, and they want conceptual lot layouts and conceptual setbacks to be reviewed as a master plan and come back later for platting. This project's so small, master plan doesn't really get you anywhere. So it really probably needs to be all together as one, rather than technically, yes, you could recommend rezone, no on the site plan and no on the plat. That's possible. We have it packaged as one recommendation, but it is three different things that are happening at one time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I quite followed the lot configuration issue in terms of how the units fit and meet the. To us, it's pretty simple. It's the primary entrance is really the design compatibility question that this pivots around in terms of where essentially the front door is. So I'm not sure I quite followed the change in lot widths and all of that. The open space that's through the middle of this project, that was an ask of staff for the intent of the conservation ordinance was to have connected green spaces. And to have more openness. So rather than have a bunch of smaller spaces, we focused on trying to have them get to one larger connected from north to south through the project. So some play could be in there, but I'm not sure widening the lots really functionally changes, especially on that north lot. I don't see how that really is going to change significantly their entrance arrangement, if that's what you're trying to get to, is the proportions of the entrance to the garage.
Kind of, I'm thinking like one of the concerns was that you don't want a very dominant front facing garage, right?
That's the compatibility standard,
That's
correct?
the compatibility standard. So if you're looking at the way it's designed right now, so that on the North Ekman Drive is the front facade or front entrance to all of the lots on the topmost or the northernmost row of units, because of the lot width, you can only put a certain width of house on it.
Correct.
And for you to accommodate the width of that garage entrance and allow for entrance to the house, there's only so much width of that entire unit that you can have on that lot. Now, if you had, which means that you have to pull that garage out a lot more. If that width was broader of the lot, then you would be able to push the garage back so that it was not like a very snout house kind of look, but that distance to the front facade would be lesser. So that's where I was going.
I get what you're saying. I think just looking through the site, and as we've looked at it before, if you add 5 feet to each lot, you're not going to have the open space in the front. They have to. We think the conservation ordinance requires that.
And I'm not asking to change the width of the lot, which is why I said that you probably still want to keep, even with the 10.44 units per acre density that you're going with this layout right now, I'm saying that if you pick a different footprint of the house, you might be able to address that snout, the extent that the garage is protruding out into the front. So at least that one compatibility standard might be able to be addressed. So I don't know if that's an option for you. If you have different house plan that you might be able to fit on it, that might help address that, at least the garage issue a little bit. I don't know.
So I guess that's why. So option 2 is, if you picked option 2, there's 2 ways to approach it. One is to flip the door. The other is to look at something along the lines that you're talking about. I don't think anybody could answer that tonight on exactly if you went with alternative 2, what the outcome would be.
So at this point, we cannot separate the PUD overlay rezoning approvals?
You can. I just
With
don't
the
think
design.
there's not much value. There's definitely no value to the developer because that's not the primary question of whether this should be FSRM. It already is FSRM. It's the configuration that the PUD is allowing for. So you can. It's a rezoning, it's a site plan, and it's a preliminary plat. 3 separate things. Alternative 1 is to approve all 3 of those tonight. You could break them off and do them separately. It just doesn't advance the project for the developer in that circumstance. The rezoning itself doesn't really help.
I say I got a problem with alternative 1, but I don't know what the answer would be necessarily, except send it back or, well, anything 2, 3, and 4. But anybody else have any other comments? Seeing none, this time I'd entertain a motion.
I mean, I'm okay with alternative 1. I'll go ahead and make the motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that City Council approve the rezoning to a PUD with major site development plan and preliminary plat for the property at 2098 West 190th Street with the following recommendations. City Council accept the proposed lot layout and facade design for the 190th Street townhomes with the private street serving a dual purpose as an alley and a private street, and therefore the homes along 190th Street meet the standard without having a front facade that complies with the compatibility standards. And B, request City Council initiate a zoning text amendment to clarify the applicability of the compatibility standards related to a single-family attached housing unit and alley access. And is it appropriate or is it possible to add something else about
Sure.
requiring a shared maintenance agreement?
Yeah, you can add additional recommendations.
Yeah, for that drive.
So what's the rest of the?
I'd like to see some type of maintenance agreement put in place, just so that's clarified between the two. And I'm sure that's something that they'll work out.
Okay, a second. Hearing no second, the motion dies. I entertain another motion.
I mean, is it still okay to have a discussion like as a commission? Or did we close that portion?
I think you make a motion. Yeah, I think
That closes our ability to discuss
I
the,
think you're supposed to discuss a motion at this point,
okay,
not just general discussion. Otherwise, we won't move forward towards.
right. Towards a, I guess I don't feel real comfortable about alternative 1 just because this PUD overlay was more recently approved. This is the first, like the applicant has stated, this is the first opportunity we've had to look at it as a commission. And so I guess I would feel comfortable supporting alternative 2 and seeing if there's any possibility that the applicant could meet the standards, and if really there's nothing that can be done, maybe going back and looking at addressing the PUD overlay language so that we could do a text amendment to address the situation. It just, again, it seems like we made a change to allow for some flexibility. Now we're being asked for more flexibility. It would be nice to see if it's possible to get a little more from this particular applicant, to see if anything more is possible to meet the existing PUD overlay.
So you saying you want alternative 4?
Alternative 2, I guess, is what I would feel more comfortable with. So it essentially it would be approving the rezoning, but then they would have to bring these units in compliance with the existing PUD overlay, which would require them obviously to get the garages behind.
Okay, what I'm asking, is there a motion in there?
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, trying to give you guys an idea of the direction that I'm comfortable moving. So as maybe we can move towards something.
Right, but we've,
Yeah, so I think it's time for a motion, and if there's a discussion of the motion, that's really where we're at as a commission at this point.
Okay.
I would like to offer a friendly amendment to it or addition to it.
There's
In
no
regard-
motion.
in
There's no
regard to-
motion right now.
Oh, what's that?
There's no motion
there's
right
no
now.
yeah, there's no.
Yeah, there's no
There's
official
no
motion.
friendly amendments.
Okay. Well, then I would like to point out that I'd like to see, still like to see something in regards to the drive. Whether it's a shared,
So let's get a motion on the
Right, we
table.
need a,
okay.
Yeah,
we're
so
asking for a
comments
motion.
And
aren't
then I'll
getting us
add
anywhere.
add my amendment, okay.
So we have to have some kind of motion. Alternative one's shot down. So we're looking for a motion, a completely new motion that you want to propose, or one of the other ones that 2, 3, or 4.
So I have a question. If I'm understanding Ruth correctly, you are thinking more on the lines of option 2 with maybe additions. Do we have the option to, like, if we decide to go with, say, alternative 2, I know we can add a friendly amendment to add onto it as a condition. Can we also remove something from it?
Sure. So alternative 2 is like a framework for,
Okay.
Yeah, you
for
can,
something that staff thinks is workable. You guys can alter that as necessary.
as I understand it, we can propose any,
You can propose,
Alternative.
you can propose
Right.
alternative 5,
Okay,
which isn't even
gotcha.
written.
All
yeah,
right.
that's what, so
We-
if somebody has
We
another,
try to give you a
the
bracket.
only one we can't do is alternative 1 because that is not,
I can try to take a stab at this and see if I'm echoing everyone here.
please.
I will recommend that we go with alternative 2, where we approve it with conditions. We approve all of this with conditions, the rezoning, the preliminary plat, as well as the major site development plan with conditions where, with condition A, as is listed in the staff report, that they have to adhere to the design guidelines. I would make a friendly amendment to it, and you can help me piece this together, to add the north-south driveway between the two properties between Vintage and the subject property, have some kind of a shared maintenance agreement put in place if there does not already exist one.
I think you almost need to have something going west, even though it's going onto the other property. You have to have some sort of agreement between the two entities that, because, unless you put a gate there, people are going to go that way.
That's anything west of that
Is on other private property.
is not,
It's not in an easement.
Yeah,
not an,
Yeah.
is
it's not
not
an easement at all.
part of this
Completely
at all.
private, so they'll
Yeah.
have to work
They-
that out.
They
I
need
think
to
you can
figure that out.
articulate your intent.
Yes.
Yeah.
I question that you can require one property owner to do something on another
Yeah.
owner's
No.
property when they don't have the right to be there in the first place.
Right.
So I think it's clear your intent is that you really want them to work together on a maintenance agreement.
Yes.
I think that's obvious.
Okay.
So I would probably leave it at that and see where the applicant and Vintage can get to, and see what update they can provide to city council.
Okay, I'm agreeable to that.
Okay. And then thirdly, I would strike out B, condition B, and I would give that flexibility to the applicant as well as staff to work it out. If they want to work that in with whatever solution they arrive at later, fine. If not, I wouldn't want them to have the entrances from 190th only as a condition. So I would strike that out. That gives them a little more flexibility to figure out what they want to do or can do with it.
It-
So strike out B,
So
keep
you- what-
keep
what-
A as it is, and then a friendly amendment to add some kind of a workable what was the maintenance agreement for the north-south driveway between the two properties.
Okay, as I understand it, you have to actually, you can call it number 5 or whatever you want to call it, but you have to actually say it out what you want.
I think she did. I think she said she wants to approve all 3 elements with condition A of alternative 2, which is the only design option is to modify the south facade where the garage is. And then additionally add that they work towards a maintenance agreement for the vintage co-op with the vintage co-op property to the west. I think that's.
Yes, and now that you mention it, I want to add one more condition.
I didn't mention it. I repeated what I heard.
Oh, no.
I will, my friendly amendment, I'm going to do this again. Sorry about this. One last time. So I recommend that we go with alternative 2, where we keep where we recommend approval of the rezoning to a PUD, the preliminary plat and major site development plan for the subject properties, with condition A as is in the staff report. Strike out condition B, friendly amendment to add in some kind of traffic. I keep forgetting that.
Maintenance.
Shared
Control
maintenance.
device?
Shared maintenance
Shared
agreement.
maintenance agreement for the north-south segment of street between or driveway between the two properties, and also add the condition B from alternative 1 as is into the recommendation, so that the city council has to initiate some kind of a zoning text amendment to clarify the applicability of compatibility standards related to single-family attached housing units and alley access. So that will help clarify that issue we've had with front-facing, alley, north-facing, stuff like that. I think that I'm done.
Does everybody understand the motion?
Second.
No, I'm asking if everybody
Oh, okay.
understands the motion.
So it's 2A as it sits.
Mhm.
B is replaced with the maintenance agreement.
Okay, as I understand your amendment, it reads, the Planning and Zoning Commission can recommend that the city council approve with conditions the request for rezoning to a PUD with the preliminary plat and major site development plan for the property at 2098 West 190th Street with the following conditions: that the compatibility standards of section 29.111 4, 6, and A be adhered to an architectural design of the garage facade for the 190th Street townhomes be adjusted to comply with the standards of not having the garage protrude in front of the facade with the primary entrance to the home. And request the city initiate a B saying request the city council to initiate a zoning and text amendment to clarify the applicability of the compatibility standards relate to single-family attached housing units and alley access. And C, a maintenance agreement between the developer or the applicant and the Vintage Co-op for the north-south street. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Say yay, nay, excuse me. All those in favor say yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
All those opposed? Nay, nay. Passes with alternative 2 with the conditions that was stated.
So it'll move forward to city council with that recommendation. I don't have a date specifically to announce right now for that.
And when it goes before the city council, the public should show up.
Mhm.
There will be additional public hearing notice when it goes to council.
Okay. Item 9, zoning text amendment for temporary use of yard waste facilities. City?
Yes, so city is the applicant on this. So that unique situation arose last spring when the zoning board of adjustment was considering a special use permit for a yard waste facility. The yard waste facility was under contract with the city, and they were just beginning the second term of a contract with the city. And they had requested to not meet site improvement requirements related to the yard waste facility, arguing that they were temporary and that a lot of other history went into that. Ultimately, the zoning board of adjustment approved them for 1 year, but asked city council to address the issue of whether a yard waste facility or other temporary uses could be permitted by the ZBA without full compliance to the zoning ordinance standards. So city council considered this, and they've narrowly directed an option for temporary yard waste facilities. So what we've proposed is very similar to how asphalt batch plants are allowed to be considered on a temporary basis. So essentially, if you're approved for the site by the zoning board of adjustment, they get to decide at that time what site improvements are necessary to meet compatibility standards of the special use permit. So it can't go on forever without meeting standards. That would be a permanent use. That this allows for some discretion by the board to consider unique conditions, basically, of a use that's not permanent. So we're supportive of it. It is again narrowly scoped. It's modeled very much after how the asphalt batch plant option exists in the code. We definitely did not want to broaden the idea of temporary out and try to sort out how long you can do things before code improvement requirements are mandated. So we prefer to keep this narrow in scope and to just address yard waste facilities.
Okay, and then questions? Excuse me. Yeah, questions for staff?
I'm assuming that you're referring to attachment A when it says B in the alternatives and the department recommendation, Kelly, just to clarify. Because I didn't see an attachment B. What's the packet
You are correct. So A is the draft ordinance.
of what you guys are recommending?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I think we made a swap out at the end and we didn't get that adjusted.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, members of the audience. Does anybody want to come forward to offer comments or questions on this item? Seeing none. Public comment is now closed. Commission, any discussion?
None.
Ruth?
None.
Okay. I will now entertain a motion.
Looks fairly straightforward to me. I will recommend that recommend that City Council adopt the zoning text additions proposed for the addition of the new section 29.1315 temporary yard waste processing as described in attachment A and complying with the alternative one suggested by staff.
Okay,
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. So approved. Commission comments. Thank you for the hard work tonight.
That was a very long discussion, so I appreciate the patience of staff, city staff here and applicants, everyone, as well as commission members. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I have none.
Stay warm, everyone.
Okay. Staff comments.
Yeah, just really looking at the next agenda that we gave you. There's two substantial items on there we believe will both be ready. What's important to know is we can't meet in this room on February 2nd. City Council has this for budget discussion. So we're looking at other options. Our best option available may be out at the water plant. There's a larger room. It's not quite as big. It's not set up like this, but we can fit the public in there and give you space to sit at tables and run it. So right now, that's probably our best option available. We're looking at a couple of other choices. So pay attention next week when Lori or Natalie, whoever emails you, don't come here on February 2nd.
Unless
We'll miss the meeting. So that's my big thing.
And that'll be put out to the public also.
Absolutely. So when we do public notice, it'll put it won't say City Hall on the location.
Might have an emphasis on that too, just to make sure that-
We'll try to highlight that 515 Clark is not the right place to be. So we think they'll make it, maybe not both of them, but pay attention next week.
Courtroom isn't gonna be big enough for this?
No, I mean, they're two big projects. You could definitely have a couple dozen people possibly total come in for that. Maybe not. But it's a large PUD in South Ames, and then it's Hayden's Preserve is Rose Prairie.
Oh.
So it's the first plat. We've all gone through the site plan and master plan, all that stuff, but it's the first plat for the first addition out there. So
Finally.
you could say that.
Where at?
190th and Hyde on the other side.
Oh, on the other side, okay. So you guys might want to pay attention to that too.
They have.
Okay.
They have.
Good.
So, not a guarantee, but possibly and definitely don't come here. Right, Lori? Okay, that's all I got.
At this time, and any motion for adjournment? So moved. We're adjourned.